Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about is a couple of the ideas that students brought up in the muddiest points is kind of confusing. So I'll share my screen. Basically, the two topics that we've covered so far are the body orientation stuff and tissues. So in the body orientation Nearpod, the thing that confused students the most was this idea of proximal versus distal directionality. So distal basically means like distance or farther away, whereas proximal means closer to. But what can trip students up is like, what is that in reference to? So this bone, what we're actually looking at is the humerus bone. So up here, this is where your arm would connect to the shoulder, and down here would be the elbow. So when you're thinking about the point of origin, right? So proximal means closer to the point of origin. That's where the entire appendage attaches. So for the arm, that's the shoulder joint. So which is closer to the point of origin, the elbow or the wrist? Clearly the elbow is. So that's going to be proximal to the shoulder in comparison to the wrist. So that's one thing that sort of trips students up. I will be publishing some other practice questions for folks to practice with those terms. Some of the other terms are pretty straightforward. It's just a matter of getting familiar with them and practicing. But if you've never been exposed to some of these terms, it may feel like learning a foreign language, and it really kind of is. So a lot of these terms are Latin. And so you're learning a foreign language, and there's a lot of vocabulary in this first week. But I say with caution, try not to get too overwhelmed by it. The purpose of this kind of rapid exposure is that we're going to be using these terms all throughout the semester. And so now you have these for reference. So again, there's lots of regional terms. I tried to give you some pointers in the audio for tips and tricks for how to remember them. But for the first exam, what I would focus on the most are these directional terms. So getting really familiar with superior, inferior, anterior, posterior, medial, lateral, proximal, and distal. So those are the ones you want to focus on. And then you also want to practice with the cavities. So I'm not going to quiz you on what are all of the organs in the thoracic cavity. You don't need to know that yet. But I may have a exam question where you're looking at these quadrants or the 9 abdominal regions, and you'll have to identify them. So also focus on that for your first exam. The other thing that students brought up was in the tissues. Some of the questions were about how can I tell the difference between the 3 different muscle tissues? So for skeletal muscle, I think this is the easiest to identify because of those really easily distinguishable striations or lines. And so there's lots of little lines in the skeletal muscle. In smooth muscle, you're not going to see any of those lines. So it's just going to look like a blank slate. And then for cardiac muscle, to me, this one looks the strangest, right? It's not totally like one blank pink sheet. Instead, it's going to be a little bit more separated. And then you can see that there's lots of nuclei in the cardiac muscle. And nuclei are just like the center of the cells. So definitely practice with identifying those 3 different types of muscle tissue. I might have one of these on the exam and say, what type of muscle tissue is this? And you'll have to identify it as skeletal, smooth, or cardiac. I'll give this a second to load. Maybe not. But this slide shows it really nicely of how skeletal has those striations, smooth, a nice blank slate, and cardiac is going to be a little bit strange looking. The other thing that tripped students up were the serous membranes, so the difference between parietal and visceral. I think the hand in the water balloon analogy is probably the best way to think about it. So the part of the balloon that actually touches the hand is what we call visceral. But then the outer membrane that's exposed kind of to the environment, or in this case, it would be to the body cavity, is parietal. So if you look at the heart, for example, this would be the visceral pericardium. So breaking that down, visceral means touching the organ, pericardium means around the heart. The outer membrane is the parietal pericardium. So it's still around the heart, but it's not actually touching the heart. So one of those questions was about the lungs. Which one would be actually touching the lungs, visceral or parietal? And the correct answer was visceral. That's the one that actually touches the lungs. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing and then open it up to any questions, because I think that was pretty much it for tissues. You got some practice with the lab. You will need to be able to identify those same images and classify them based on tissue type. So like I might show you this picture of adipose tissue and say, what type, which four of which four tissue types is it? And you would tell me that it's connective tissue. But yeah, okay, go ahead, stop sharing and then open it up to any questions you may have.
I think I'm good.
Okay. So you're welcome to log out. I think I'm just going to stay open for any questions. Otherwise, I will hopefully see you next week.
I just have one question about,
Yeah.
I know I already emailed you about this, but I just want to make extra sure that I'm like doing everything in visible body, because I finish everything in the comprehension checks and everything, but it still shows that I haven't like submitted it. I just want to I just really want to make sure that there's nothing else I need to do, because it's like stressful just seeing it on here. Like it's like due.
That's weird that it's showing incomplete. So I haven't checked emails yet, but I will be doing that this afternoon. Okay. And so I'll take a look into your visible body and see what's going on. But if you completed it, you should be okay.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. It just showed, like, it won't let me retake any of the quizzes. Like, I've done all the practice quizzes. It just still shows, like, for like Sunday, August 30th, it still shows that it's not turned in. So
interesting.
Yeah,
so let me clarify then. Are you completing the practice quizzes or the comprehension check that's in the courseware?
Yeah, I'm completing the comprehension checks and the practice quizzes.
Okay, so the practice quizzes you can totally keep doing, but those aren't graded. They're just for you. So the comprehension check is what's graded. You can only do it once though, so it might not let you back in if you've already done it.
Yeah, that's so like, yeah, so since I've already completed the comprehension check, let's see, it just says, yeah, it just shows like graded quiz, attempts remaining 0. So then there's nothing else for me to do in the visible body.
I can actually just check really quick. Yeah, you're good.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Any other questions?
That should be it.
All right. Yeah, I know we had 2 labs in 1 week, but for the most part, from now on, you'll only have 1 lab a week. So it should get a little bit better in that sense.
So for the Nearpod items, just as long as we go through the whole slideshow, the whole thing, because like obviously there's no submit thing, you just exit out the browser and then you're done.
I wish there was like a thank you for submitting, but yeah, once you get to the end, you're good to go and just close out.
Okay, yeah, because I wasn't really confused by that, but I was like, I'm trying to make sure that I for sure did it before, I leave and then I go and check again, and it was like, yeah, okay, you're done.
Right.
All right.
Right. Cool.
All right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Have a great afternoon.
I had a question about that too, because I remember you had sent me a message saying don't forget to close out of the browser when you're done, which I had done. But I wonder, do you think maybe if I go back in to like review it again, it starts me over?
It does. It does.
So that's probably what happened, because I went through and was looking at a couple slides again, and so I think
that's totally okay. I actually encourage you to do that, because I can see your submissions as separate. And so I don't know why it would have done that for you, because it showed me that your initial one was still open, and then I saw the one that you started again as separate. Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't.
Sure to like go through it all and then close
Yeah.
out again.
But if you want to open up a Nearpod and not answer the questions or not go all the way through it, you totally can. So I'll grade your best score essentially.
Okay, awesome. And then this is my
Hi, cutie. That looks yummy.
She stuck her foot in the bowl of chili, and she has white socks on.
Yeah, you're not getting that out. Those socks are done.
No, I know. But I had to log in on my phone. I think there's something wrong with my computer. My computer's 11 years old, so it's probably just my computer.
Okay, no worries. So I did record this meeting, and so I can probably